Hello, everyone. Yui here, back with another commentary. This time for Raoul Walsh's 1940 classic, They Drive by Night. We will be doing our little commentary where you can listen alongside your own copy of the film or just as a podcast. We're going to do a countdown so you can sync up with us if you want to. Three, two, one, go. No, this one, I love this film. It's so good. Oh, so Jason, what's your
Yeah.
relationship with Raoul Walsh? This is the first Walsh film we're doing.
Well, like a lot of people, I think my first Walsh was White Heat, the classic with James Cagney. I think I recorded that off of Turner Classic Movies several years ago. Loved that. I don't think I knew that much about Walsh himself at the time. I think it's one of those cases where, Raoul Walsh is pretty underrated compared to some of the other more known auteurs of his time. And I think it's one of those cases where that movie is probably known to more people than Walsh himself is. So I don't think I really thought of him much. And then afterward, I looked it up and I looked up some him and I saw that, some people really liked him. And I think I saw Pursued not long after that. And I really liked that. And then I didn't see anything of him for a while, for several more years, until I think it was after I saw a lot of people on Twitter talking about him that I started checking out some of his other stuff. And I watched several more of his movies. And I think it was when I think it's kind of like there was a writer I think you posted who talked about how Walsh is compared to some of the other big auteurs like Ford or Hawks or Ray. When you watch like one of their really famous movies, you see their genius like right away, and you get a sense of who they are and what their film form is. Whereas with Walsh, I agree with that writer you posted, where I think it took me a few movies to really figure out who he was as an artist, and I think he was really a guy who really grew on me. And so
Yeah,
now I
it's a
really
weird thing
like.
because I think that is how a lot of directors are actually, at least in my experiences. Sometimes you just got to settle into them a little bit, watch a couple of movies, see how you really feel. Because, yeah, sometimes the rhythms are subtler, the obsessions, the fixations, the style, it's quieter. And I think it's easy in that case to overlook what they're doing in, especially like I think for someone like Walsh, who was essentially one of the original pioneers of narrative cinema. Like what
Yeah,
we
I still
think of
got to see the
as,
regeneration.
yeah, what we think of as a movie is in a large part shaped by someone like him. You know, it's shaped by him and John Ford and Henry King and Alan Dewan and Michael Curtiz, like these people who just not only did they, make a ton of movies, but they were just figuring out the basic language of what we now call classic formalism. And I think it's like you can look at that and say like, oh, this is like everything else. But really, what I find interesting about Walsh is that even though he was an innovator in that way, when you actually watch his movies, they aren't reducible to the thing that he created. To me, they still feel very distinctive. And I think this movie is a classic example of that because on paper, it is like the most archetypal Warner Brothers movie about, like a working class situation, like tough talking characters, crime, darkly lit photography. You got George Raft, Ida Lupino, uh, fucking Bogart, but Bogart before he was a star, when he's just
Yeah,
a supporting actor.
yeah, he was
Uh,
almost thought of like Pesci at this time.
yes, and you got Alan Hale, and it's produced by Hal Wallace, and it's just so emblematic of this period of Warner Brothers and what like a Warner Brothers film looked like. The only way it could be more so is if it, had Betty Davis and James Cagney and uh, Edward G. Robinson. There's just this movie really ticks all the boxes of like if you wanted to show someone uh, what a Warner's film like what and kind of this doesn't really exist anymore, but back then there were such things as studio styles,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think this is
absolutely.
like this falls right into like what you would expect an average Warner Brothers film to be, because it's not even it's like I've heard some people call this a noir. It's not a noir. It's like a crime movie. And it's not a gangster movie either, right? It's just a movie
No,
about crime. But Warner Brothers made a ton of films like this where it was just like stuff like Manpower. You know, there's just intense stories about working class characters doing dangerous jobs. And they made a lot of these. And these are like this type of film doesn't really get made at all anymore. You know, like
not
you don't
yeah.
have movies made with any degree of uh concern for like you don't have movies made about Starbucks employees today, you know, or anything like
No,
that.
yeah,
Like it
or
just
even
doesn't.
like oil rig workers, or like, you have reality shows about crab fishermen, but you don't have movies about crab fishermen.
Yeah,
Like
that's right. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you don't like it's kind of like the realm of like the dangerous blue collar workers considered the realm of like quote unquote trash TV rather than like, like prestigious film productions
Yeah.
for the
Well,
most
yeah,
part.
it's tough though because Warner Brothers during this period wasn't exactly prestigious, I would say.
Yeah,
Uh, I would say like
Born
into the
MGM.
40s now, it was starting to get more like that. But you know, by and large, these movies are, you know, usually pretty low budget, pretty uh gritty. You know, like the Warner Brothers didn't really become an A studio until the late 1930s. And so like what we're seeing here with They Drive by Night is almost the last gasp of a type of movie that just existed everywhere in the 30s. And then as the glamour and the war really took over the concerns of the 1940s, you know, this type of movie never really came back. So Walsh got to make the last few versions of this.
Yeah, there's always I've really noticed his feel for like sort of like working class characters and Mylou. Like there's an almost like there's always like little time for like little asides that like aren't necessarily important for the plot, but just like these little characters and like their habits and their like relationships with like there's always like a little like interconnected world of people. Like if you think of the street scenes and the Strawberry Blonde, where like his dad is going around talking to all the ladies, or like the social life of the club in Gentleman Jim. Like you really get there's always like this little world of like working class characters that exists beyond just like the needs of the plot in Walsh's movies that I really like.
Yeah, well, that's something great about him too, is that because he just had access to the Warner Brothers stock company of character actors and everyone who would show up, you know, for so long, he was really able to, yeah, just populate his films with these great little social circles, and you know, it's like over a wide variety of topics too. What I like about Walsh is that he was one of these guys like Ford who was sort of able to do every kind of movie, and nothing was really beyond him. But nevertheless, I think They Drive by Night is pretty distinctive in as much as I think it shows his concern with what I would call a sense of human agency. I think what
Mm,
defines a lot of his movies is characters who are always grappling with their own awareness of their capacity for action, their own responsibilities towards others, and how those two aspects interact with each other, right? It's like, do you owe yourself to yourself, or is there a wider set of concerns beyond you, right? And
mm,
I think a lot of his characters are always caught up by the dreams they tell themselves. They're always, you know, saying like, "Oh, I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna do this and this." There's this set of aspirations that the Walshian
yeah.
characters often have, where they're on like a journey towards some ideal, and rarely do they meet it. And then, you know, if they do meet it, oftentimes they end up not liking it. So we'll see later in this story, uh, you know, eventually we do find success where Raph's character, you know, he kind of, you know, he gets to quit doing the humdrum thing that he starts this movie, you know, working with Bogart at, is driving these dangerous trucks on night roads. eventually there's a point where, he can sort of exist beyond those means that he's provided for himself, and it doesn't exactly turn out to be what he wants it. And I think in Walsh's gangster movies, this is very typical, where it's like, okay, we get success, and then it's just not what you want it to be at all. It just sucks. And I think it's interesting that Walsh, but it's like, even though we have those encounters, like Walsh is never, his characters are never disillusioned. There's not this sense of like depression or finality to what they do. They're always like, okay, well that didn't work, so now I'm on to the next thing. Like there is a plasticity and a courage and a tenacity to the worlds that he portrays, and I think this movie does that so well, where it's like you just really get these guys who are like, kind of carved out of the rock and the soil of the earth, who, you know, like aren't necessarily great people, but they're strivers, and they're striving towards some ineffable definition of success that's a moving target, and even they don't know quite what that is or what that's supposed to be, but it gives them this animating principle that propels them forward into adventure.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of summarizing Walsh. There's this interesting dialectic, like you said, they're strivers, so they have a future goal, and yet they're also very present. Like they tend to be very, very supple and reactive to like each new thing that comes in front of him. Like what's happening here? Like every time like the claim guy comes, they always find like a new way of just dealing with it in the present, and then like they'll deal with it later, right? And with what you were saying about success, I think that there's a, but also at the same time not getting bitter. I like how Walsh, he, it's hard to place him politically because on the one hand, I think he believes that certain strivers can achieve this success, but at the same time, I think he was aware of a cost of success. Like I think of the end of Gentleman Jim, where Jim Corbett's just beaten John L. Sullivan, and he's had his triumphant moment, like this working class guy finally getting into the top. And there's a bit where like a humbled Sullivan comes up and talks to him, and he seems like he's kind of very sad, and he kind of walks off, and Corbett looks at him walking off after a while, and there's a sense of like, oh, I'm gonna be Sullivan someday,
Well,
like
yeah,
I'm
he gets told as such from what I remember. There's this sense in which, like, someday you're going to have to fall for some younger guy who's just as hungry as you were before you beat me. And that awareness of a wider cycle of ambition that, I think what's interesting for Walsh is that he doesn't just view that as being the special province of a certain type of person. I think all of his characters, they're sort of competing for what their dream is, and then they almost have to outbox the constraints that dream that imposes on their own sense of personal agency. And so it's like, oh, I want this thing, but also I don't want to be bound by anything, right? Like I want to, like my desire exceeds the object of my desire, and I find that super fascinating. And you put it very well, where it's almost like a melancholic moment, right, in that movie, where it's like we get this great earned victory by Corbett, but then you also get this like awareness of, but it's impermanent. At the end of the day, all this is temporary. And I think Walsh is good at that, in that he very much is a director of the moment. Like even in movies where there are flashbacks, like Strawberry Blonde, I think what's beautiful about that movie is that
my
you
favorites.
you have that sense of like, nostalgia and, love for the past, and, oh, my great, reverie of how I met this person, and, where I was at that time. But then you get to the end of it and he's like, actually though, like I don't want to live in the past. I'm actually like okay with where I live right now, and like I'm actually pretty happy, so like I think Walsh, he's got a balanced sensibility where he's able to, have these dreamlike uh idealizations of the past or the future to come, but nevertheless his characters they're not bound by those. They always say like, okay, but that was then and I'm here now, or like I want to go do something else. Like they're not hemmed in, or at least they try not to be hemmed in by the past or the future, and just live in the present in a very tangible way.
And yes, and I think part of living in that present for Walsh is, for all of his reputation as a tough guy, I think Walsh really does believe in like bonds between people, and I think for him, like, like that's what the goals are really for, and if you're doing it healthily, like in Strawberry Blonde, like, he goes to prison, then he doesn't get what he wants, but I think part of the reason why he can live in the present is because he looks at Olivia de Havilland and he's like, I'm creating something with this person. And like a Gentleman Jim, after he has that melancholy moment with John L. Sullivan, like like he looks at his lady and he feels better. And I think that, like, I think Walsh very much believes in, like, part of living in the present is, like, I think all of these things that these people are doing, it only means something if you're doing it with another person. Like if you're creating it like with another person. And I think the people who die in Walsh's movies, when they die, tend to be the loners. Bogart in High Sierra, or Cagney in White Heat. If
Right.
you're
There's almost this
pursuing
sense of like
solo.
characters who like ascend to a point where they can't return back to the normal world. And so they sort of just die off in this private way that, is exclusive to them and them alone because they can't re-enter a social space.
Yeah, so you either live with other people or you die by yourself.
That's a good way to put it. So, what's your relationship with Bogart? I mean, I don't know. Seems like a stupid question, but like this is the last film that he did before he really became a star, and he's great here as just a part of like a larger supporting cast. And I love him in, yeah, these early Warner Brothers movies that he does, where he usually is like playing alongside Cagney or Robinson or someone else, and he brings such a great uh, kind of brutal presence. Like he gets to play bad guys a lot in these early films, and man, I think it's just so fascinating how effective he was at playing like these really scary, dangerous types of people. Like the earlier scene where he's just about to like lunge at this guy who owes them, and he's just like, okay, you're gonna give me my fucking thing, and it's like Raph has to hold him back. Like there's this element to Bogart's persona that is like early on he had these edges and they never quite went away. I think he just in like the later films it became more of this like he was this wounded romantic, right? That was uh you see that in High Sierra. I think that's like the foundational film for his new persona, and then afterwards in Casablanca and the Howard Hawks films. But yeah, like what's your kind of feeling in regards to him? Because I always love him, but I always find him also a kind of peculiar figure in the history of cinema. Like there's he seems to embody like a particular, I don't know, like a moment of like a type of heroism that was, I think, very distinct to the 1940s and the 50s, where you had this idea of like a guy who, is basically an asshole, but at the same time, he held this inner world inside of him that I think he couldn't quite escape from, right? He was always dragged into his own inner nobility.
No, yeah, I mean, I grew up with Bogart because my dad showed me a lot of classic movies growing up, and no, I know what you mean when he occupied a very distinct type of space in movie stardom, and like the whole on top of this whole like kind of wounded, dangerous working class nobility. Like, I mean, he has a I could see how a certain person could find him like attractive in like a rugged kind of way, but he's not like a classically handsome dude like at all. And he's not like a big or strapping guy, and so I think that you could not imagine a guy like Bogart being as big of a star today as he was at this time. And I think it's like kind of related to coming out of the depression, you know, where like most people, even a lot of people who had been privileged, were now at the spot where, you know, their lives were full of like material difficulty. And so and then World War II comes along, and so you have all these people who, you know, are the same, you know, uh angry alienated Americans as everybody else, but they've all got to, you know, do their duty and fight in World War II. And so I think you just have this in this period, this period of like an archetypal hero of like, oh, I'm stressed out. Like I've learned to deal with the world by using like cynicism and even anger as like a form of protection. But like I'm tapped into some sort of like larger idea beyond myself, because you know, also national, there was more of a national identity at this time. Like there was more of a sense of like a shared reality too. So I think that it was easier to have sort of a represent an archetype of that represented a lot of people in a single person with Bogart. Whereas I can't think of anybody in the modern movie landscape who you could look at and be like, oh, they're representative of like a mass identity that like almost everyone in America can relate to. I can't think of anyone who would fill that spot that
Yeah, it
somebody
doesn't
like
really exist because all the actors sort of exist in their own specialized, hermetically sealed little, you know, they are almost like cordoned off to a large degree into a type. And yeah, Booker, I mean, I think it's a credit to the type of performer that thrived on Warner Brothers, where, you know, yeah, he's not like a classically handsome guy, but he's just indelible on the screen. You know, you just can't take your eyes off him. Oh my God, it's like the way Walsh stages this whole bit with the trucks. I mean, this is incredible stuff. Like, just great rear projection, great miniature work here. Just, you know, like no notes. It all looks. I mean, this is the first time I've watched this Warner Archive Blu-ray, and man, it just looks pristine. It looks lovely.
yeah, this is all about the cost of the fruit that you buy at the grocery store. It's
Exactly. Yeah, see, and that's what I find fascinating too, is that these movies, you know, it's not just an attitude or a pose that they put on. You know, for this type of film, there's like a intricate understanding of, you know, like what the relations of labor are throughout, you know, like what a job means, not only for these people involved, but for a wider section of society, and like what failure and success looks like.
yeah, and there's a and it's interesting because the way that the two protagonists are positioned in this world is that there's a, you know, there's a deliberate contrast put between them, between the drivers who just work a regular schedule for one company where you get a regular wage, you have a set time that you're on and off, and then they're
The
like
Wildcat drivers.
yeah, they're the wildcats, they're the freelance, they pick their own jobs. And so it's like the whole striving thing of like, oh, okay, you can either just like have like a regular job where you don't get much, but like your life is consistent and like things are taken care of for you, and that's something which is pretty rare these days. Or you can like try and strive and have your own and work towards freedom, but you're not even at freedom yet. That's the thing. You're striving to get to the point where you can be at freedom, but like the way that you do that is that you take on more of the risk, like yourself. It's
Well,
like the
exactly. The benefits get socialized, but the risk gets privatized.
so it's part of that whole like how much are you willing to like it's the even the supposed like supposed meritocracy of it. Well, you know, if there is a meritocracy, you have to die to get in the way to get there. You know, if you don't, if you're not good enough. So
Right.
yeah, it's just that he understands like the cost of like you said of what having to work uh does to somebody.
Yeah, and especially having to, yeah, take on that risk in a way where, you know, you really are gambling with your life to a large degree. And Yeah, you look at like the cars and the trucks back then, and they were just rickety death machines
Oh
to a
yeah,
large
no,
degree.
no airbags. I don't
I love
think.
the way that Ann Sheridan is costumed. I like her fucking her beret and the trench coat. She looks awesome.
Oh yeah, she's super cool. I don't know a lot about her. Do you know a lot about Ann Sheridan?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, she wasn't really a Warner's player, as far as I understand. Let me see what else she was on.
I know she did a few movies with Bogart.
Yeah, so she was in I Was a Male War Bride, Murder at the Vanities, Dodge City, Edge of Darkness, uh, Cecil B. DeMille's The Crusades, Walsh's Silver River. Yeah, so like, she kind of came and went. I not that like in a I don't say that in a mean way, but what I would mean is like I don't think she really had a particular uh, route or sensibility or like a type of movie that she did. I think because I look in here and just it's like yeah she worked for Walsh a few times, did some movies with Curtiz, um, and yeah I haven't seen a ton of her stuff, but I like her whenever she shows up. She's cool and yeah like I mean she's super funny and I Was a Male War Bride with Cary Grant. They're a great combo.
Uh, so speaking of Bogart, of course, George Raft and Bogart are very linked because not only did they do a few movies together, Raft famously turned down quite a few parts that Bogart ended up taking and
Yeah, well,
helped make
Bogart
his
essentially
career.
stole his position at Warner's.
Which I mean, look, I think is for the best to be honest, because like I don't like
Yes.
dislike George Raft, but I think Bogart is definitely the more considerable actor. Uh, But yeah, Raft was weird in that like he was a dude who like seemed to be very resistant to like what his casting was because there were a few even though he started out playing these mean gangsters, when he started getting more famous and having more lead roles, he started wanting to not play unlikable characters or to play characters who would die. That's why I didn't want to do High Sierra, because like he didn't want to die at the end. And for Double Indemnity, he was offered Fred McMurray's part, but again, he didn't like the fact that he would die and that he was evil. So he asked that it be rewritten to have him secretly be an undercover cop the entire time. And Chandler and Wilder were like, "No, we're not gonna
No,
do
no,
that."
it's not happening.
So,
I
yeah,
always
he
laugh when actors are like this because it's just funny. It happens to this very day.
No, yeah, like just demanding that they be the ones who are in charge of like
Well, but it just reminds me of like The Rock nowadays, where The Rock's like, I can't be beat in a fight. Like all that's horse shit, Like it's just macho nonsense, but it just I think it's like yeah, just frankly ridiculous. But yeah, Raft, it's like yeah, I like him in this movie. I think he does a good job. He's never exactly a point of appeal for me. Like, I mean, he's very indicative of, yeah, he just, he made so many Warner Brothers films that he's kind of like, you're watching a Warner's film when you see him in it, just because like he wouldn't, I mean, he worked for Paramount for a little bit, but just like his sensibility, the way that he talks, it is sort of like adjacent to Edward G. Robinson, just like a poor version of that type of thing. Uh, he did a movie with him called Manpower that Walsh also directed. Just a very strange movie, kind of similar to this, where it's about these guys who repair electric power lines, and it's just a bizarre movie. Like him trying to like George Raft talking to Marlena Dietrich in that film. It's just like these people should not exist in the same universe. like, like it's just I just don't. Yeah, he was in. Was it the Fritz Lang's musical You and Me, which is an okay movie. Um, yeah, he went to the Walsh a couple of times. He did Background to Danger, which is like a cool sort of Casablanca ripoff, but it's a fun movie. He did. Oh God, he did Spawn of the North with Henry Hathaway. Soul at Sea. Yeah, so he was kind of, he was fucking around, floating around. Um, yeah, it almost seems later in his career, like he played all these like stunt cast parts, playing a gangster and playing into his real life associations with, I don't know, whatever kind of mob was involved around at the time.
Well, yeah, he one of his like last roles was in well, not last, but one of his later roles was in Some Like It Hot, which was like deliberate throwback to like, 'cause it's it takes place during the 20s, and the casting of George Raft, that was like the equivalent then of like trying to think of who would be like a like let's say bringing back like Joe Pesci in like a comedy movie about gangsters in like the year like 2025, right?
Right,
That
yeah.
was
It's
the
stunt
equivalent of
casting.
that. And like, oh hey, remember like how this guy was in all the gangster movies that you loved when you were like younger? Well, here he is playing an old gangster. Like so yeah, no, I think he became one of those like what do they call him in Sunset Boulevard, the poker game
Oh, I
that
know what you're talking about. Yeah.
like, there's a name for the like that's the something faces or something like in that poker game. Like he became one of
Yes.
those popping up in movies every now and then as like just permanently stuck in time as George Raft, the 1930s gangster.
Right. Yeah. No, it's entirely believable. Oh, my guy Alan Hale. I fucking love him. He's in so many of these Walsh Warner Brothers films. Like just I don't even know. I must have seen like 20 films with Alan Hale in it. And I fucking he's such a great energy. I love him when he shows up.
Yeah, no, he's great. Yeah, he's also in. Yeah, he's
Also, this
Cagney's
is just
dad.
so improbable. Like Alan Hale just being married to Ida Lupino. Like what the fuck?
What's interesting, ironic is that so Alan Hale's son was an actor as well, and Ida Lupino later in her career she directed a lot of television, and she directed several episodes of Gilligan's Island, and Alan Hale's
Wait,
son,
really? She directed
yeah,
Gilligan's Island? Wow.
yeah, she directed a lot of TV later in her career, and Alan Hale's son played the skipper on Gilligan's Island, and so Ida Lupino worked with Alan Hale in this movie, and then more than 20 years later, directed his son in several episodes of Gilligan's Island.
It's fucking crazy.
I gotta see her. I still haven't seen one of her features that she's directed. I hear that she made some really good ones.
Yeah, no, I've only seen one of them called Outrage, but it's very, very good. I mean, okay, like I don't want to take away anything from her, but like you can definitely tell that like the director she worked with, like she picked up a lot. Like like that film is like so confidently made. Like I was just like, damn, like basically right off the bat, she kind of had this command of style. So, she just like seems to be like one of these actors who like really paid attention to like what directors were doing when she was working with them. And so when she made her own features, she was just able to really confidently express whatever she wanted to because she just had like an understanding of style in a way. Like I always admire that, like actors who actually give a shit, like and just like become great directors in their own right. Like when Clint Eastwood does that, like because there's so many actors who try their hand at directing and it's just bad or just half-assed or incompetent. But no, I Lupino, yeah, I want to see more of her stuff because Outrage was a great film, like truly, truly good. Kind of, I say that she learned stuff. Honestly, it's more similar to like a King Vidor movie than anything by
Hmm.
Walsh or the other people that she worked with at Warner Brothers. So yeah, yeah, she's super cool. I love her, and she's like crazy. Like just her fashion in this movie. She's so much more fashionable than any of the other characters. It's just like I just love like it's like this working class milieu, and then she comes in and she just oh God, what are the odds that these are by Vera West? Let me look.
Yeah, no, these are like this is it's funny because we were talking about the Strivers, and it's like this
Oh no,
couple.
custom designed by Milo Anderson. So, but who also did a lot of great films. But yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just saying, and it's like you look at this like couple, and it's like this is what they're striving for, right? Like this is what you're gonna be when you get to that position. You're just gonna be decadent Novu rich, just
Exactly.
living for nothing and hating each other and just being really tacky and materialistic. That's what you strive for in America.
Yeah. That couldn't be me. Oh, I like how he's got a painting of a truck on the wall.
All right, let's see if we can get a look at see. Yeah, yeah, kind of what looks like a realist painting of a truck. Yeah, it's funny because as much as I do love abstract uh, painting, you do kind of wish that there was more of like the slice of life paintings that were so big for like the Impressionists, but of like modern slices of life. But painting, you know, I guess that painting no longer was the medium for, I guess, conveying that slice of life. I guess there were other mediums in the 20th century that were more like I guess, widely available for that. I guess, but
Well, but we also have to remember that art of that type was like a commercial industry for magazines and newspapers, right? So like,
yeah,
you could
that is
actually
true.
get paid for being a realist painter to a large degree because you would paint covers, you would do illustrations. There was a lot you could do, and I think now I don't know. These people must still exist, right? Like I just imagine maybe they're on DeviantArt or something, or they do work for hotels, or they just do their own private stuff.
God,
Yeah, so this is interesting. Ida Lupino in this movie, it's like she plays what is essentially a femme fatale character, but before noir even exists, really. So it's really a trailblazing performance. And apparently this is like just the like a later scene, when she gets out of the courthouse. That was the scene that secured her contract at Warner Brothers because they were just so impressed by her acting in that scene. And it's easy to understand why because God, yeah, she's a very singular character in this, just playing one of these like female psychopaths that just emerge so often in these like noir type movies. I just watched Otto Preminger's Angel Face and Gene Simmons
yeah.
in that movie. You just watch it and you're like, oh, okay, so you're just like you're just dead behind the eyes. I fucking love it.
No, yeah, Lupino's so great. Her physicality is so specific. She has just these very evocative, very angular poses that she's always in. Like she's never just and like
Yeah,
it's
well, everyone
never.
else in this movie is a little bit more like relaxed and knockabout, and she's more, yeah, like poised and yeah, angular and specific. Yeah, but just again, like just her being in a relationship with Alan Hale is just the most comical thing. It's one of those things where, like just immediately from the get-go, you know that things are gonna get fucked up. And it's just this is not gonna last.
No, it's funny that when I did my short recently, it was about a couple, and I didn't have many options for my male because not a lot of dudes showed up to the audition, and so and one of them was unprepared, so I only really had one option, and he was a little different from the way that I imagined the part. And then there was the top two women for the female character. My number one choice was the closest to how I imagined the lady on the page. But then when I looked at her and I compared her to the man that I had for the male part, I was like, even though I think you are very much fit the woman on the page, I cannot imagine the two of you being in a relationship. Like you just don't
Right.
have that energy, So I went with my second choice for the female character because I could more easily believe her being in a relationship with the guy that I had to choose. And so yeah, no, so much of the time it's never just like the actor on the page. It's always how they relate to other people. Uh, it's the ensemble, and if you deliberately mismatch that, you can get for great tension, and you always wonder, and you almost wonder like what how did they get together in the first place? Did she like know him when he was just a striver, or did she just like start going out with him once he became like a successful
It's a good
uh,
question. I'm not sure.
trucker magnet? But yeah, this stuff with Bogart and his wife is so sad because it's the embodiment of what we were talking earlier. Because she wants him to have more of the steady, stable job, even if he doesn't make much more money. And that's another thing. It's like the striving, the destabilization of like the personal in the search of something like greater. Because like he's never home because he's trying to make something for himself.
Right.
Uh,
See, I love the way Walsh stages this composition here, like this
yes,
back and
yeah,
forth. This is again, he just makes the most of the frame. This film is replete with so many instances of just, regular conversations, but like he's always putting actors in interesting places, having them often occupy like the same shot and just speaking to each other at the same time. Like he doesn't he
yeah,
just like despite him inventing a sort of style that would later go on to I think be abused more or less. He just shows you how it's done because it's like he's shooting an Academy ratio, but man, like all of his stuff is just filled and clear and direct, and he knows how to like use these little camera movements to highlight the
yeah.
impact of various scenes. He fucking gets it in a very material sense, and I think, yeah, God, I just love like the way because like what I like about Walsh the most is that his style is something where you really have to like settle into it to begin noticing the weird ways that he complicates what we like perceive of as like a standard formal approach. And when you begin to notice those idiosyncrasies, like again, like the choices he makes, they speak pretty loud, I think, even though I think by and large we aren't supposed to notice them. And
No,
and I love that stuff because it's like it's unobtrusive, but at the same time, he's got his own definition of what style is.
no, I totally agree. Like, he really likes for a lot of scenes of when it's just two characters. He really likes his medium two shots. He tends to only save shot reverse shot for like very intimate moments or like very
That's the thing
revealing.
too. He doesn't overdo close-ups. Like I'm just so fucking anal retentive about this, but like God, he just avoids it very deftly. Like his direction is so economical and not fussy in the slightest. And I just wish we had more of that type of style today. Uh, to what you were talking about earlier, yeah, I couldn't agree more with, it just is tragic in that sense that in that scene, you know, on one hand, he's like, wanting to, uh, please his wife and like what she wants. But at the same time, he knows that basically him and Joe are in it together and they can't just go out on each other, right? Because it's like basically if one of them bails from this trucking life, then the other one is just, you know, like you're not going to do this job by yourself. So they're kind of in it together. So he's torn between, loyalty to his friend and his coworker and loyalty to his wife.
Yeah, and there seems to be in a few Walsh movies like this tension between like what he sees as like the action based sort of like striving world of like men and like the personal sort of like quiet life of like a domestic life with like a woman. Like you think of like Gentleman Jim, like boxing and his striving through boxing and but versus his romance with like the woman in that film, or the Strawberry Blonde, his striving for like with his political friend and for positioning and making something of himself. Or in this movie between like the smash and grab world of trucking and the home life. There's always this tension between like the world of action and like the world of like domesticity in some of his movies, which I
Yeah.
find.
I mean, something interesting too is that, like, we talk about it in gender terms, but in movies like The Revolt of Mamie Stover and, uh, oh God, what was the other one with Ida Lupino?
The
The
Man
Man
I
I
Love.
Love. Yeah, like, he actually, like, basically, like, the female protagonists in both of those films are in the same position that Bogart and Raft are here. So, like, it's not exactly like, like women in the home type thing because
Right. Yeah.
when he centers like female characters, he ends up reversing it where like the men are in like a more domestic position in their stories. So I think it goes to show like I think to a large degree he wasn't really too bothered about uh I don't know, like yeah, just like gender roles. At least not in the same way that Hawks often in his movies is very deliberately flouting them, right? For Walsh, it almost seems to just be immaterial. Like, like whatever he's focused on, I think it's like Hawks almost like treats men and women as like identical creatures, whereas with Walsh, I think he like he doesn't deal with men and women as much as he deals with masculinity and femininity, right?
Hmm,
And
yeah.
I think he's more interested in that than I think like wanting to illustrate like oh look at this. Look at this shot. Look at this.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
so great. This is crazy stuff. But look, Walsh just does this out of nowhere. Like like what the hell?
No, yeah, it's like that greater awareness of like the things that mediate our lives, like you were saying with the trucking, and then this just with this intimacy, just it emphasizes the distance between them, I think, but still that intimacy through that distance, showing the telephone wire in a way that I really like.
I mean, it's fascinating because that's the type of thing that you would see in a silent movie, right? It feels
Yeah.
like that's of that era and Walsh is able to bring some of that forward into this movie made in 1940.
You were something that you were talking about with Walsh's style. Something that I've noticed that he does that I tried to do in my movie a little bit is that there are certain scenes where like he'll start with like a close up of something that is like important to the scene or like a sort of like a thematic object, and then he'll track out to reveal its place within the larger picture. That's something that it's sort of going from like the particular to its place in the general, and then sometimes he'll do the opposite. Like he'll start out with like the whole larger scene, and then he'll go into something more particular within it, like or like he'll end on a tracking in on a face after reacting to someone at the end of a scene, and I think it's
Right.
these. Uh, I really like the way that he uses camera movement like that in a way that I think is very revealing.
Yeah, well, it gives the scenes, I think, an easy lyricism that doesn't really call too much attention to itself, but at the same time, there's a power behind it, and that, like it's almost like a symmetrical principle. Like Lang does that a lot in his movies too, where he'll
Yes.
begin and end scenes with like these same devices.
You ever? I'd be curious to read any of. This was based off a book. You ever read anything by the guy who wrote this the original book, AI Bezerides?
Oh God. If I have, I don't know it. He also wrote Thieves Highway.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
So and yeah. Oh, okay. Hold on. Wait a second. So
he
he did
wrote
the screenplays
screenplays
for
too.
Kiss Me Deadly, On Deadly Ground. Oh, sorry, On Dangerous Ground, Track of the Cat. Okay. So the Angry Hills too. Interesting. So okay, yeah, he was a novelist and a screenwriter.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he has an interesting life. He was born in Turkey to a Greek father and an Armenian mother, and his dad was a truck driver for a while. So he was married later on in life to the screenwriter Sylvia Richards, who had writing credits on Secret Beyond the Door, Ruby Gentry, and Rancho Notorious.
Ooh,
So kind of
that's
a
a potent
power couple.
combo.
Yeah. And yeah, the screenwriters for this movie, what are their names? Wald and McCulley. Yeah. They also wrote they were two of the writers in the Roaring Twenties as well, so they worked with Walsh a few times. Yeah, Richard McCulley and Jerry Wald. Yeah, they both were two of the writers on the Roaring Twenties.
Oh shit.
Yep.
Ooh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's a great.
Oh
That's a great
Christ.
crash. No,
So
it's
so that one wasn't a miniature. That was a full-size truck, I think.
yeah. I'm pretty sure that was real.
Yeah. Good stuff.
I mean, it's there's a reason why there's that old cliche about truck drivers being on speed and pills all the time. I mean, sometimes they have these deadlines, and I mean, as the I imagine that like with our lack of infrastructure development in the past few decades, that I
Oh, it's
imagine
become
that
even worse. Yeah.
yeah, I imagine that like trucking is like really difficult, and then as the rate of profit continues to decline, that things get like deadlines get tighter and tighter, and you have to like try and like make more and more, and so yeah, I imagine that it's probably not much better now.
Well, I'll tell you what, uh, at the job I work at, the truck drivers who come in, it used to be uh, in a timely, consistent manner.
Oh
Uh, but
yeah.
then, but then the corporations started, being like, oh, we can't actually afford all you guys, so we're only going to hire the people who we can afford to pay the less. Like, we're just going to undercut
Oh.
everyone. And man, now it's pretty brutal. I mean, sometimes we just get people who just they're driving drunk, with these huge trucks full of, fucking goods that go into people's homes. I mean, honestly, actually, wait a second. It's the exact subject of this movie. What am I talking about? Because I work at a grocery store. So like it literally, they are the type of people who are in this movie. And yeah, it's, for us in receiving, it's a big fucking headache. But yeah, I've had people come in and they just like they park that truck and they just fucking fall asleep. Uh, gosh. I mean, I don't blame them because like yeah, the stuff at the warehouses is bad and stuff, what they get hired to do, they don't get paid enough. No one, the whole chain is fucked. It, I hate to, well, it's not a cliche because it's true, but like truly, ever since COVID, things have just been a fucking nightmare. Oh, I like the bow in her hair.
Yeah. And I really like how tonality wise how her white bow and outfit really stands out among all these sort of middle gray
Yeah,
tones.
she's very shiny.
Yeah, kind of yeah, like has her stand out as something sort of spoiled and special among all this. It's funny because that shot, like Walsh, like used deep focus in quite a few places before Citizen Kane made it really popular, which is
Oh,
something
well,
that I
this is one of the great myths of cinema that I fucking hate. Just this idea that like no one ever used deep focus or knew what deep focus was before Orson
before.
Welles or Greg
Yeah,
Toland. Like so many Walsh films just have it. Like and there's nothing made of it. You know, Renoir has films that have this. Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wish people would stop repeating that because it's just not true. And frankly, it's the kind of thing that you say when you actually haven't you don't know what you're talking about because
Yeah.
if you just watched any film like this, like again, just watch like a Walsh film, made in the early 40s or the late 30s, and you'll just see like, oh yeah, everything's in deep focus a lot of the time. Like it was just a thing that people did. Uh,
Yeah.
like fucking what is it like? Oh God, I'm trying to think of who else, but like
Stroheim.
I'm pretty sure Ford in plenty of his movies had it too.
Yeah, you can see Eric von Stroheim use it in Greed
Oh,
as well.
totally, yeah. Oh, it's such a good movie. Fucking hell.
Oh yeah, I love Greed. I was very lucky. I got to see a print of it fairly recently with a live score. It was fucking
Was that
awesome.
print the just like the regular cut?
Yeah, it wasn't like the 4 hour cut with like stills or anything like that. It was just the footage. Uh, which I mean, I actually haven't seen the reconstructed cut, which has all the stills. Which I'd be interested in seeing. But so this is so a lot has been made when people talk about this movie of how the first part of it is like this very working class, like sort of labor drama. And then, like you were talking about, how people call it a noir and you don't think it's a noir. So now we're at the part of the movie where, which is like, which is why even if it's not accurate, people call it a noir because then it becomes this domestic
Yeah.
murder drama, and it becomes like a melodrama of like lust and
Yeah, it
desire.
starts to get into more like yeah, double indemnity type territory. Uh yeah, Walsh, it's interesting because like Walsh, I don't think he when it comes to noir, I'm struggling to think of a single film that he made that could be qualified as pure noir. But he made a lot of noir adjacent movies, like westerns that had that inflection, and then a lot of movies like this, and then High Sierra, which feel like prototypes for noirs. And this movie and High Sierra almost feel, yeah, it's like it's a dry run in a sense because you have a lot of stylistic similarities, but there's also a lot of things that it's like a halfway step between the crime films of the 30s and then noir in the 40s, which are just two entirely different things.
And so yeah, this scene is so it's funny because we're getting to the point now where George Raft has a steady job working for Alan Hale, and Bogart's at home, but there's still tension. It feels like they still don't have what they want. Uh, no, yeah, and it's this whole yeah. He's so your whole identity is tied up with like what you can do,
Right.
and
And now that
you're
he's been disabled by the fucking accident, there's a sense of just anger and resentment.
because there was something interesting where earlier in the movie when his wife was asking him to do another job, he was saying like he said something about how like I'm the type you had to go and marry a guy who couldn't get like a real job, and it goes to show again that awareness of like the class character of like the way that work is looked at, because like it's like you would think, well duh, what do you mean that's not a real job, like you're
Yeah,
literally
exactly.
responsible for like our food, but because it's basically like it's like something that supposedly anybody can do, it's just quote unquote labor. It's not like that demarcation line between quote unquote like skilled labor and just
Yeah, because it's
wearing
like it's
a
also
body.
transport being a transient thing too, where you're kind of at the whims of the schedule, right? It's not like a consistent, I go to a factory. It's not that kind of job.
But yeah, there seems to be if you look at like the relationship between like Sheridan and Raft or even Bogart is, and you compare that to like Lupino and Hale, it's like, there seems to be more of a bond, a real bond and struggle than like this sort of non-existent relationship where they both just have comfort and nothing really else is like they're not really united and struggling for anything.
Right, yeah, because at least the shared struggle and the empathy for that has bound them, whereas with Lupino and Hale, it seems more like a thing of convenience and superficiality.
Yeah, appearances and Alan Hale is very condescending to Lupino and
Yeah, I
he's
mean, well, that's the thing is that like I called her earlier like, kind of a sociopath, and I think she kind of is, but also, he's not exactly a great guy either, so they're sort of two jerks who have stumbled their way into each other, and then by the end of this movie, they fall out of it pretty spectacularly.
Yeah, because that's the whole. I think part of like why this whole the whole concept of the femme fatale, like this and Double Indemnity, was so controversial. Like the idea that like marriage could be this like poisonous thing, was very was not something that like a lot of tastemakers wanted to convey to the American public. What with the Hayes
Oh,
Code.
well, but hold on. Marriage is a sacred institution, mandated by God. So you tell me
Yeah.
that people aren't happy all the time? No, come on.
I'd be curious to know, because I know that like because I think you know more about Walsh's life than I do. I know that Double Indemnity was controversial, and they had a lot of problems with the Hayes Code because of like the adultery and the spousal murder. Do you know anything about like this movie and whether like it faced any sort of like problems or whether like there was anything about like like how like this sort of dynamic being portrayed on screen or
No, no, no. Well, I no more than any other Warner Brothers film. I mean, sometimes once in a while they ran into censorship issues. Surprisingly, with a lot of their early anti-Nazi films, there was this sort of crusade against them by pro-German people and factions within the industry and within Congress and stuff. Because, I think that's something that's basically forgotten today is that, in addition to making these class conscious movies, Warner's was basically the only studio who, I mean, like very early on, cottoned on to, like an anti-Hitler, anti-fascist attitude. And it's not like they were, socialists or anything, but, uh,
no.
like the Jack Warner, I think there was this clear mandate that, look, like we're just not going to fuck around with this. Like we're going to, this is like an attitude that I think is important. And so we're just going to, make films like, Confessions of a Nazi Spy and, like there was other films where like they called out the Klan and other forms of racism. And so like there was, I think there was an idea where you were making entertainment, but also you were wanting to address subjects that basically were taboo in the cinema that like no other studio bothered with for a long time. And it was sort of groundbreaking in that respect. So with those were definitely controversial, right? Like that type of film, you had these pro-German or even like neutral organizations in America where like, you can't release this, this is fucking propaganda or whatever, like a lot of that stuff. And yeah, so like there was that. With Walsh, I don't recall him running into any censorship. Uh he hewed pretty closely to what I think was like the party line, right? Like he wasn't like a Billy Wilder or like an Otto Preminger type who sought out controversial subjects or anything like that. There wasn't this, I just don't think that was his temperament. Uh, he made what I think he felt was suited to his talents or what was assigned to him. And I think by and large, he left the studio system to then kind of cover his ass while doing so. I mean, I'm looking through his filmography. Yeah, there's not really anything here that I would consider to. No, yeah, like all of it's. I mean, I hate to characterize him as like a wholesome director, but kind of is really like there's just nothing. I mean, maybe yeah, stuff like Roaring Twenties and White Heat, maybe it got dinged a little bit for, promoting gangsterism or whatever. That's just obviously bullshit. But outside of that, I don't think so at all. But no, yeah, the stuff at Warner Bros. I think was more, yeah, you had these projects which were just explicitly designed to be political and to sort of change people's hearts and minds about their attitudes towards, the Nazi party and racism and things. And I think those definitely piss people off. But Walsh didn't make too many of those, really.
Hmm. It's funny you mentioned him being wholesome, and that's something that I've thought of like when I go over his filmography because he was Irish American I think and I see a lot of like certain sort of like Irish American sort of storytelling traditions in some of his work, like the attention
Oh
to
yeah.
like
Well, here in this movie, there's like these two Irish characters who are just exist for, they're almost like John Ford characters. They're just cracking jokes all the time with the slot machine. Reminds me of Donovan's Reef.
Oh yeah, I still need to see Donovan's Reef. I know like a lot of my mutuals have been going crazy over that movie.
Oh, it's a masterpiece. A true great film. But yeah, so like yeah, him and Ford, yeah, the two kind of Irish American uh, war horses of old Hollywood, really. And they were good friends. And yeah, they have a similar sense of humor in a lot of their movies. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I was reading a funny story about Walsh because he worked with George Raft on a movie called The Bowery, which I haven't seen, but I know that he had to break up fights between Raft and Wallace Beery. Like apparently they did not get along, and apparently Walsh pulled a prank on George Raft because his character jumps off the Brooklyn Bridge. And he kept on convincing him and convincing them that he was going to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh,
And
Jesus.
he's like, look, George, it's okay. And then George's like, look, didn't all those other people die? And then Walsh was like, look, George, they all wanted to die. You don't want to die, right? So you're not gonna die. It's fine.
Right. It's
And
it's the mindset of it all. So this interesting thing they have in their home with this like this automatic door opening system. This
oh
must be pretty
yeah.
advanced for 1940, I imagine, right? It's like high tech.
No, yeah, motion sensitivity. No, yeah, I think yeah, this must have been very high tech back then. It's funny because there's also something similar in I don't know if you've seen any Jacques Tati, the French comedian, but he made in Mon Oncle, which is one of his great comedy masterpieces, a motion detecting. Oh, sorry, just this bit of acting from Lupino is just fucking
It's so
amazing.
good. Where you just like you see the consciousness dawn on her. And again,
Yeah,
like
no,
this is what
I
you use a close up for. This is incredible stuff.
yeah, I really miss like something, and I've noticed probably the area in which I'm the most divergent from a lot of my mutuals and people I follow in terms of movies, in terms of a lot of modern movies, is like actors and the kind of acting that I like, because I feel like I kind of miss when acting was more physical, because I feel like a lot of
Yeah,
acting
me too.
now, it's very much about like it is like a purely in for a lot of actors today, particularly younger ones, it seems like almost a purely internal process, then you just speak that internality with words. Whereas I feel like even in like the 70s, which is thought of as like a naturalistic period, if you look at like a lot of those actors, like like De Niro or Nicholson, there's a physical quality to them, even when they're still. Like it seems like their whole body is at like attention, and I feel like acting was more about like the embodiment of like of the meaning of a story with like poetic gesture, as opposed to just imitating life. And sometimes imitating life is fine depending on what you're doing, but I wish there was more space for like
Well,
these
the
more
problem
sort of.
is that it's like imitating life, but what kind of life? It's a very restrained idea of the human personality that exists today in I think a lot of acting, and yeah, it's unfortunate because I think people are so scared of being accused of overacting or being campy or hammy or whatever. They're so terrified of that they play everything so restrained. And it just, yeah, I don't know. It's funny. Like, I recently watched the first Hammer horror Dracula film, and
Mm.
that's a movie where everyone's like, they're not afraid of just like making these huge gestures. Like Christopher Lee is like leaping all over the place. He's got this wild, crazy look in his eyes. He's going for it, but it's great. It's exactly what the film needs. It gives it this huge propulsive energy. And I think nowadays people look at that kind of stuff and they're like, oh, only Nick Cage does that, or whatever, right? Like whoever the figure is who gets to be accused of overacting, and really a lot of it ends up just being everyone's just so like quiet and mousy and reserved and internalized. And not that that's bad in and of itself, but yeah, it is just interesting how acting today has become much, much more introspective and inflective instead of like say what Lupina's doing here, where I wouldn't say it's broad, but it's like it's loud. She's very clear and declarative, and you understand what's going on. Like she's great at depicting the nervousness and the mania that's overcoming her. And I don't know, it's just one of those things where like you just immediately understand what's going on with the character and you don't have to, fuss too much about it. Whereas now I think what's popular is to, portray this internalized, alienated subjectivity that yeah, I almost wonder too, it reminds me a little bit of like emo type behavior, like this like everyone's a little bit too precious about it's like the world doesn't understand me, like that type of thing. Like a lot of acting nowadays seems to remind me of that
I
type of
you
attitude
know
where like the audience is expected to project so much onto the actor
yeah.
and fill in the gaps with their own subjectivity when really just there's not a lot going on there. And sometimes, that can work for certain things, but I just wish there was a bit more variety. Yeah, I agree with you. Physical
No,
stuff is great.
no, I agree, and even like and physical can even be if you're not even like ostensibly doing that much. Like you mentioned, like alienated, but like if you compare a lot of the actors today who seem alienated versus someone like Monica Vitti and Antonioni, yeah, she's playing an alienated character, but there's still like a just a physical grace with just like the way that she like moves in that movie. And I think it's because there was just a lot more like movement training and like acting training back in the day.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Well, nowadays you're just expected to. It's like you have your face and your voice, and then everything else. It reminds me of there was that article about Marvel films where they get in crazy shape to play these characters, only to have it be covered over with CGI and like us barely see any of that anyway. It reminds me of that a little
yeah.
bit. It's like we hire the whole actor, but we only want like a couple parts of them, really. You You buy the ticket for the whole seat, but you only need the edge. It's kind of a waste. And you know, with Monica Vitti in those Antonioni movies, people really misremember those because she does a lot of like twisting and shouting in those. You know, she's not just this dead-eyed fucking wastrel.
No,
She
her
does
acting.
things, right? She's not just like a mannequin, right? I mean, even like you want
No,
to talk
her
about
acting's
mannequins, even with
beautiful in that.
Bresson, you know, talk about Bresson, like, he makes the most out of his characters' bodies, right? Like he does a
No,
lot of
yeah.
interesting things too. So I think, yeah, I think what we're asking for is just more variety, uh, more of a pluralistic understanding of what can be achieved with acting, rather than this one particular node of, you know, what's in vogue.
Well, I think that with the reason why I think Bresson's models are so powerful and like evocative, even though like they're seemingly not actively expressing emotion, is that his method of inducing that, where he would have them do a lot of takes and have them focus on very specific physical actions. I think what that does is that it creates an external focus where you're not focused inside of your head. And even when you're not doing a lot, that external focus, I think, is very powerful, you know. And so, and I think that that's part of the whole what we're talking about with the with acting being more physical in the old days. I often like, and you were talking about the emo thing. I look at a lot of old school actors, and I feel like there were more their focus is more on things outside of themselves, around them, as opposed to like inside of themselves. Like when I watch them.
Oh man, when do you think water coolers were invented?
Oh yeah, that is a good. I'm thinking early 20th century, like probably like think about like I guess what you need to create like the prep or I don't know. I mean, I guess the water. Well, it depends. I mean, I bet there were maybe there were earlier than that. There were water dispensers that just weren't that just didn't have the ability to make them cool. You know, because I guess it required there are certain mechanisms that I guess you would have to have in order for it to come out instantly cool. So I'm thinking like early 20th century.
Yeah, because they obviously have them here, but yeah, I just kind of like, damn, you know, it's kind of it's an ancient looking water cooler.
But yeah, you notice when you look at Raft in these scenes where he's doing the job, he doesn't seem as lively like in when he's just giving orders and going over papers and stuff than when he was like driving the truck and getting in all the action and all that. He
Yeah,
seems
because now he's talking about contracts and stuff. Yeah, it just doesn't seem like you know, he's just stepping into Alan Hill's shoes more or less. I know, like it's just crazy. Literally every single outfit Ida Lupino's wearing in this movie is just the most like spectacular, shiny, like bedazzled. Like she never dresses normally. It's always like just a fashion show, but it's super cool. God, you know, we fucking need glamour back in movies too. Movies don't have glamour today.
yeah, she always has those shoulder pads too in all of her outfits and all
Oh, well,
these
this is
movies.
the era for it, right? Like this is what you would do.
But yeah, no, Ida Lupino really has a lot of range in her career because you look at a part like this, but then you compare it to a part like on Dangerous Ground, which is the total opposite. And she could really had a lot of range. Whenever I think of Ida Lupino, I think I mentioned on our commentary of Bad Day at Black Rock how I went to the movie museum, which is up at Lone Pine. And in that museum, there's somebody made a bust of Ida Lupino that barely looks anything like her. And it looks like it was like melted in the sun. It was one of the weirdest, creepiest things I've ever seen. So I always think of that bust of Ida Lupino whenever I see her.
It reminds me of that that fucking Squidward painting. What was it? Bold and brash. More like belongs in the trash. But
Yeah.
you know what though? Fucking, I don't want to shit on that artist that you're talking about though, because God knows, we're doing what we can, and
Yeah.
it probably isn't as bad as you're saying it is.
Yeah, maybe not. It has been a long time since I've seen it. But yeah, no, what's interesting is that, like, so Ida Lupino, she's playing this femme fatale, and she's not happy with her boorish, like, Novu rich husband, but she's attracted to George Raft, even when he's like, before he gets this job, when he's just like an independent trucker making money. So there seems to be this like this attraction to this sort of like dangerous like blue collar man when compared to like her sort of soft
Well,
bored.
but 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 I also think she wants someone to push around. Like she's talking here about, it's like you'll learn to like, the way that I treat you, all this sort of thing. She is abusive in a sense.
No, yeah, I think no, I agree, and I think that she wants to like, oh, this blue collar man, well, I can conquer him and tell him what to do. There's something almost very like, yeah, very interesting, sort of like this something almost reminds me of like something that like Lena Wertmuller would do later on in her career. This character dynamic, like sort of like class tensions and like eroticism.
Yeah, I think there's this element here too. I always love when there shows up in movies, but this idea of like the rich people living this vacuous, boring, terrible life, and they need to like vampirize the working class in order to, give vitality and spontaneity to their existence. This is a very common motif that you see in a lot of movies. Like we need to, you know, once in a while we'll descend to the salt of the earth types to remember what it is like to be human, and then once we're done with them, we'll throw them back on the street into the trash, right? Like it's this classic fucking affluent person attitude.
Well, it's like, it's the way that like a lot of like modern wealthy suburbanite people will like sort of put on these working class affectations of where it's like, you live in a nice house in the suburbs, but it's like, but I have like but I wear like a trucker cap, and I have I just like going out and driving my truck, but it's like a super, super like expensive truck, and it's like I'm just a working class guy with my beer cooler, but like, it's like a super high tech like beer cooler.
Yeah,
So
right. Yeah. Or it's like a barbecue that has all the bells
yeah.
and whistles on it. I see. Look at this like amazing fur coat that she's wearing. Oh my God. It's just huge. It's enormous. Like fucking it's like she must yeah, she's killed like 4 foxes for that coat.
Yeah, now we're in the part of the movie where it now becomes like an investigative
Existential.
and a courtroom drama.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
this part, this whole back half does remind me a lot of Angel Face, because that's a movie that's divided down the middle between two halves. And also divided via like a murder, which it's a good structure for a noir type movie.
Yeah, I will admit, what do you think of this whole device with like her being triggered by like the automatic door? I'm not gonna lie, even though I really like this movie, I find this device a little corny. Uh, I don't know. What do you think?
Uh, yeah, I don't mind it really. I think it serves its function. I think it's more of like a telltale heart thing of the the inner darkness inside of her is just because she's constantly anxious and restless, and so I think like it's not exactly that she's totally triggered by these things. I think they just come to you know represent a reminder of the scenario that she was in and the reality that she's facing. But also, you think of like, an automatic door. It is even today. It's if you have a home with an automatic door for something like it's pretty fancy still, I think. And I think it becomes like a reinforcement of she put him in there and he died, and now she's going in here to the prison, and it's also like the gateway towards her confronting the real truth about the scenario that she's put herself in. I mean, yeah, it's like a bit of like a futzy device, but like overall, does it communicate the effective emotions of the story? Well, I think so. And I think Lupino, I think she sells it well enough. And I think it's like, as long as that works, I don't really mind if something's goofy or not. It doesn't really bother me. Yeah, it's almost a bit Langian too, isn't it?
Yeah, I
This idea of
think
like
it's
the world closing in on you.
yeah, and like the whole guilt thing and not being able to escape the fate of your decisions and the chain reaction that it causes.
Oh, I love this with these two guys. See, but this is the Walsh touch, is that you have like the Langian, scary, like ominous bit, and then like you just have two guys who are like, it's like, yeah, what's our deal?
Yeah, there's always just like a little world going on at the periphery. Uh, Always something outside of just the small world of these characters they're a part of. It's always something just going on beyond you and your. Which, by the way, speaking of, I mean, this is more of an. Have you ever see an old noir called Ride the Pink Horse?
I haven't. I've heard about it.
It's really good. I highly recommend it. I think it's really underrated, and I think that I think it, without saying too much about the ending, I think it ends on a similar note, which I think is kind of cool. Of like you see this whole story of like a guy trying to get revenge, and at the end you see that this whole thing that you followed is just that was so important to this character is just he's now just like a story that like a local will be telling years from now. Oh, hey, I remember when that crazy American came in, and so that's something that I think that movie does pretty well. It contextualizes the story you've been invested in as just something which is just part of a much larger world that not everyone else is as deeply involved in. And I always like it when movies can do that.
Oh my God. Yeah, this weird like George Lucas what is this editing thing called? Like it's like the frame flips in on itself.
Yeah. You mean that reverse shot from when it was behind Dan Sheridan, and then it
No, it's
came.
like it goes like whoop, like
Oh, you mean the
it's this weird thing that
transition?
no one,
Yeah.
yeah, the transition that no one does anymore.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I love Sheridan's hat in this scene, and her pinstripe.
Yeah,
She
see
looks
her
like
outfit here. This is more of like this is like just a great style. This yeah, like hats in the early 1940s. We need to bring some of them back. Underrated hat era.
I hate that fedoras are now associated with pickup artists because they really are great hats, and it sucks that they got ruined for everybody by a bunch of assholes.
Yeah, I don't quite know if what she's wearing is a fedora. I
No,
don't know what
yeah,
it's
but
called really.
I just meant when you were talking about just hats in the early 1940s, it just made me
Oh
think of
yeah.
that. I would wear one of those, but I feel like people associate them with pickup artists too much these days.
What, Chazen, you're telling me you don't want to wear your fedora, your trilby, and then you got your black leather trench coat, and you carry around your katana, and you dual wield Desert Eagles.
And a T-shirt that says "Dudes Rock." Oh yeah, this is Ida Lupino's big moment coming up. Her big showcasing moment that helped make her a star. Yeah, like that's when you do a close up, like you were saying. That was such a good edit. Yeah, no, there's a for all of her evil, I can't help but think that there is a sympathetic quality here. Oh god, yeah, the editing of the reaction shots are so good. And yeah, very or even just like great Ida Lupino uses props really well in this movie. And this is part of what I mean about like having more of an external focus. I think something like what she's doing with that tissue, it's very expressive, and I think it gives you something outside of yourself to focus on, so you're not as like in your head.
Right.
And
Well, that's the advantage of what Walsh does here, where we just have like a straight medium shot. We don't have to go straight into a close up. It gives us a bit more of a distance from her and allows her to be more suitably insane. Yeah, so like the Doors thing, it is goofy, but I like it. I don't know. I don't mind like plot stuff like that too much, as long as it's like vaguely interesting and they make sense within the narrative. I don't, doesn't make too much of a difference to me.
And then you get to this finale, which I gotta say, I think I didn't I understood. I think I liked it a lot more the second time around. This epilogue,
The doctors all say she's daffy, completely nuts.
because as you'll see, it seems like it's a happy ending because like he gets to be the head of the company and he got his dream and all that. But like he says right here, he was going to give his share of the company to all of the workers. And then later on, they choose to have him be like, the head. So it's still going to be hierarchical. And the only reason why he even gets to have this position in the first place is because Ida killed her husband. So, his position as the head of this company and the profit is kind of blood money in a way.
I guess so. Yeah, I didn't think about it that way. Yeah, see, I like the hat that she has here. It kind of reminds me of the hat that the Shadow has. This like slouch hat.
Yeah. She looks like an
Oh,
intrepid.
it does. I we got to do a commentary for the Shadow. I fucking love that movie.
Oh, the Alec Baldwin one?
Yeah, yeah, big
I
fan of
gotta
that film.
watch that. But yeah, no, like they're even telling him, none of us boys, we don't want any part of the executive business. So, they could have all collectively owned the business, but they're giving that up for Joe to be the head guy.
Yeah, it's a strange thing because like these films, they are like class conscious in a way, but I think it's like a particular American version of that, where it's especially with like a conclusion like this, where like it's like but we're all buds though, ha 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 ha. Like there's this this interesting bypass of any of the contradictions that might have resulted from anything, and like it is a happy ending, but like it's sort of I love you. Wait,
Winks at the camera. Yeah,
I forgot about that. That's so good.
we've seen
Uh,
death and murder, but it's all good.
yeah, all smiles. Uh, well, they drive by night. They sure did. They drove by night. Thanks for watching that with me, Chazen, and you too, listener, wherever you are, wherever you drive to, at night or otherwise.